Welcome to this small tutorial on Express Router Object. We're going to go through this router object by visualizing a train station model. So we'll start with our public directory or the home base station and have a way to route to different stations, which is station 1, 2, and 3. So let's think of that and create our model, starting with the folders client and server. Once that's corrected or created within client, we want to have some folders here, starting with public and all three of our stations that we want to go to. Within each of these stations, we're going to have an index.html file. So imagine you're in public and you step onto the train. Of course, you're going to have to step onto a platform, which is your index.html, where you get the tickets, where you go on the train, and then you're going to route to one of these stations here with its own index.html file for when you get off or getting back on. We're going to create that, so let's step into the client folder. And we're going to start with for I in the directory, do touch the file name of index.html, and we should claim that we're done. We get an index.html file in each station. Once we have that set, let's set our templates up. This will be home. We'll plug it into station 1. We'll call this station 2. And finally, station 3. Now, I hope this looks a little bit clearer that we have 4 stations, including our home station, the public. We have station 1, station 2, and station 3 with their own platforms, their own index where we step off and our foot hits ground. Once we have that set, we can focus on our dependencies and the server. For the server, let's be imaginative. Let's touch an app or an index.js file. This is where we'll create our server. And we can't do anything because we're stuck in client. So let's go back. And now we can touch app.js within the server. We'll also make a directory within server called routes. We'll have our 3 different stations. Now let's work on the dependencies. We're going to start in the console with npm init-y. This is going to get our boilerplate template for the package.json. It has no dependencies, but we can change some things here. Instead of index.js, we want to change that to app.js within server. And we want to run a little experiment here of nodemon app.js. That's saying we're going to run the server, and we can't do that yet until we install the dependencies. So back in the console, we can npm I save dev or -D nodemon server and .env. This should spin up our node modules, and our package should get filled up with the dependencies. Give this a little second here. We have our dependencies set. Did I just install server? I must have, because I don't see Express. So let's npm uninstall server and install the right thing. There we go. Now, once we have the correct dependencies, let's go to the app.js file within server, and we'll claim Express. We'll plug Express into a variable called app. And finally, we're going to listen on the app to open the server. But before we listen, we need to define a port. So let's say port equals, if our process.environment.port does not exist, then I want you to use 3000, or else process.environment.port. And our port from the .env file won't be read unless we require it from the dependency. Now we just need to add in that .env file, claim that variable of port, and let's give it 7768. Touch git ignore. We'll ignore those files, and now we can listen on the port. So let's go over what we're doing right now. We want to open up our Express app by calling Express and throwing it in a variable called app. We defined a port, which will either be 3000 if our environment variable is not here, or it's going to be the environment variable we set to, so it should be 7768. And how is this environment variable being read? It's getting read because we required the .env package that we installed and then thrown in its configuration. Now we're going to be listening on the app, and we should get no routes because we have nothing configured. So let's run the script, npm run exp. Our app is live. Let's go to 7768. And we have nothing to get. If you want to step on the if you want to get to the static page of your home site, like the main home page of your directory, that's what this public represents. We want to get to this index.html file that says home base in an h1 element. How do we get there? We can use middleware. And the middleware we're going to use is coming from this app for Express. We're going to use this, and we're literally going to take the Express variable .static, and we're going to throw in the directory from the root all the way to the folder that we're using. So we'll say client of public. If we refresh the page, we should get home base. And that's where we're at. Now, how do we get all the other bases? How do we get station 1, station 2, and station 3? It's going to take a little bit of time, but we'll have to get there and configure our application to do it, which is called routing. So, before we start routing or creating our routing base, which is another middleware, let's create our routes. Within routes, we want to touch some files. Always touching files here. Touch server routes, and this will be station1.js. We'll do the same thing for station 2 and station 3. Let's do it one by one. So for the first station, or in all stations, our goal is to get the router module, that router object. We want to export that and use it within our app.js file in routing base. So how do we start it? We're going to require express. Just a small application, nothing too big. And we're going to plug express. Usually we'll plug it into app like we did with here, but since we're using a routing base, we're going to plug it into a variable called router. And this is going to equal express dot router from the express library. Once we get that, just like our app.js, we have a middleware. We have to create a new set of middleware for each route. So whatever's going on here in app, whatever middleware is used, will not reflect or will not be utilized by station 1 router or station 2 or station 3. You got to code that yourself. So we're going to use an express.static function for the middleware, but instead of using app, we're going to change this to router. And since this is station 1, let's make this station 1. Now all we have to do is throw a module.exports or export the router variable or object, and we'll place that in our app. Let's copy and paste this for station 2 and station 3 and change the static names. So if we go through this one more time, we have station 1, all we have is the middleware, and we're exporting the router. Station 2 and station 3. Let's close that up. We have it here, and we really want to focus on this routes folder. So what we're going to do is create a new array, and we're going to fill it up with all of our required files that we need in order to route. Within routing base, we'll say const stations equals a new array, and let's give it a number of 3 because we only have 3 routes to configure. And we're going to fill it up with nothing. This will all make sense in a second. We're going to map this with an underscore and we're just going to focus on index, and we're going to return the required file. So let's return a required of routes and station. Typically you could click one of these quick helps here, but for this application, for this array, we're mapping right now, so we got to say the index plus 1, which represents 1, 2, and 3 dynamically. Since we have these returned in the variable stations, let's use this as middleware. Stations.for each, st for station and idx for index. We're going to need both of these variables. Let's return an app.use. So just like this app.use up here, we're going to return some new middleware along with app.use express.static, except this is going to be app.use for our router. And for this app.use, we're going to take 2 arguments. The first one's going to be the endpoint. So is it going to be station 1, station 2, or station 3 in the form of a path? We're going to call this station with index plus 1. Again, dynamic routing, and because we're iterating through the stations array. And the second argument is going to be that required file itself, which is represented by st. So throw st in the mix, and that's our application. Now this is synonymous to saying app.use station 1 and require routes station1.js. All right. you can definitely go through the motions, change it to station 2, station 3, or you can use a for each loop and save some code and make it easier on yourself. So either method is totally fine. Once we have this configured, let's test our routes. We have the home base. Let's go to station 1. Station 1's working. Station 2 works, and station 3 works. Great. Now let's move on forward. Let's say we are at the train station. We step on at public, home base. We want to go to station 1. We want to end up on this index.html file. We do that simply by going to the station 1 router. And in this router, we can set some routes. So we'll say router.route of test. From here, we're going to get a request of rec and res, and we can res.send test passes. Now, we're using -test, and this basically represents station of test endpoint, because station, just like all the other stations, is coming straight from this middleware station router that points to this file. Therefore, we do not need to throw in the station because it's not going to work. It's gonna come up with station test. So to prevent that, just keep it as test because it's going to read station test. If we test it out, we should be able to access the station test and the test passes, which is perfect. If you want to access this from station 2, it won't make sense because test from station 2 does not exist. Cannot get station 2 of test. So if that's not configured, it doesn't exist, then that's what you get. At station 1, it passes. We can also get crazy with it and use some redirects. And redirects is going to be a little bit interesting when you learn this. So let's clear this up. Go back to home base. Now that we're at home base, let's say we want to go from the home base or public to station 3. We can do that. We end up at station 3, so let's go to that file. And now that we're at station 3, we had fun, we partied a lot, and we just want to go to station 1 and crash the night at a friend's house. So if we want to go back to station 1 from station 3 after partying, we can say router.get or router.route back, friend house. We're going to get a response of rec and res, and for a redirect, we're just going to say res.redirect to the endpoint of station 1 of house of friend. Now this endpoint does not exist, but we will create this right now. So let's go to station 1, and let's say that your friend just moved to a new home literally just now for us to stay at and crash, and we'll throw in router.route of this endpoint .get recres, and we're going to say res.send, hey buddy, you can crash here. And instead of saying station 1, we are not going to use that because we are at station 1. This already represents station 1 of house of friend. So let's explain what we're doing here. We are starting at the public directory or home base. We go over to station 3 to party and have a great time. Now that we're done partying, we want to go back to our friend's house and redirect them because it's our actual house is too far. Home base is too far. We want to go spend the night at our friend's house and redirect to a different station. To do that, we just create a route within station 3 from the party place, and we're going to hit an endpoint of friend's house. Once we hit enter, it should redirect us back to station 1 because we declared station 1 as the router we want to use, followed by the endpoint that does exist that we just created. So let's go back to our friend's house. And friend house does not exist because of the endpoint. Let's try it again. And our buddy says we can crash here. So what just happened is we used that router to route to the station 3, and within station 3 and only station 3 we can go to our friend's house. You can't do it from station 2 or station 1, but only station 3. And we can see that example right here. It doesn't exist. If we do station 3, we route to station 1, where our buddy tells us that we can crash here for the night. And this is the power of express routing. I hope this made a lot of sense, and you enjoyed it.